Another 5 minutes we'll start the program. Some of the brothers are finishing Sunnah and the ladies are coming from downstairs to upstairs. So just give us 5 minutes. We'll start inshallah.
अभी 2 मिनट में शेयर होगा। अच्छा वो अपने वेबसाइट पे भी जाए, MSI की वेबसाइट पे तो जैसे यूट्यूब चैनल पे आप क्लिक करेंगे तो इट विल बी।
Assalamu alaikum. So we are about to start. Some of the people are in the hallway and walking around. Assalamu alaikum. They should all come here and take a seat inside. This will be a very short program. So please don't walk around. It's not a long program. It's a short program. And after the program, inshallah, we will have some tea and a snack. So anybody who's in the hallway, please walk in. The ladies who wants to come upstairs, please come upstairs. So we have reserved the back side for the ladies so they can ask questions. Yesterday we found out that Mufti Hisham is sick, and we tried to find a replacement for him, and we were not able to. So we will continue with the program. Inshallah, the program will be same, except that when you have any question about the rulings in Islam, about some of the details, then you can maybe send it to, we'll give you in a slide you will see an address. You send it to that address and you'll get a response. Okay, but there is no live person sitting here to respond to your question, unfortunately. So that's what happened.
So who's going to give us the rule and regulation with the Islamic?
That's what I'm telling you. Any question that you have about that, you will submit it, we'll give you an address and you'll get a response in writing. Okay, so let me just briefly introduce to you Hafiz Naveed Hussain, the attorney who's here. Alhamdulillah, is a Hafiz. He graduated from Marquette University Law School, and he is the managing partner of Faruqi and Hussain LLC, and he's also on the board of the Constitutional Law Center for Muslims in America, located in Texas. He focuses his practice in family law and estate planning. So Naveed is a Chicago native. He's a local. He lives in this area, very close to Dar es Salaam, and he attends Dar es Salaam Masjid for his prayer. And he also has completed Sheikh al-Hind program from Darul Qasim. So that's his brief introduction. I'll ask Naveed to come here and then start the program. And please hold your question to the end. We'll give you a mic so everybody can hear your question. On this type of program, when we do here, it may look like we only have 50, 60 people sitting here, but sometimes we have hundreds of people online. And so that's why we would like them to hear the question also. So we'll bring a mic to you when you're ready to ask the question. You're going to just clip it on your...
Officer, I have a request, please. Before starting the program, you should recite some Quran. That's the Islamic goal.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم صدق الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله النبي الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for attending today and to thank MSI for holding this program. I do think that it's a very, very important topic. I am sad that Mufti Hisham is not available to be here today. He is not feeling well, so please do make dua for him, inshallah. Because honestly, when it comes to this particular topic, and I'm not going to mention much about...
Maybe you can announce it that Ustaz Qadir is here. He will answer the question if there's any question.
So the Islamic aspect of this science is just so important for us. And one of the things that I reflect upon is we have so many different ways that society is fashioned or organized. You know, you have democracy, or you have capitalism, this, that, right? There's so many different ways that we can operate the world, and each one of those ways of operation only preserve one or two things. For example, the system that we live under, it only preserves capital. It says it preserves life and all these things, but that's not true. All that this system really tries to preserve is our wealth. But Islam, subhanAllah, is the only system that seeks to preserve more than that. You know, the scholars have talked about the preservation of life, the preservation of religion, the preservation of our lineage, the preservation of our intellect. All of these goals are encompassed within Islam that I don't believe other systems can offer, not even a tenth of. And so amongst those systems and rules is the law of inheritance. And I think as we look at the different social structures that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in place, coming to the masjid for jama'ah, marriage, inheritance, all of these different things, if we zoom out and actually understand it, we'll see how this is really the bedrock of society and can really frame and help us accomplish those goals that Islam seeks to accomplish. The preservation of lineage, of wealth, of your mind, your religion, etc., etc. So, like I said, I do wish that Mufti Hisham was here. I know Sheikh Saad is here as well. I'm not sure if he would be available to answer questions on his own time. Perhaps you can email him as well, inshallah. So to begin, inshallah, as it relates to the legal side of inheritance and estate planning, this is obviously a very, very important topic in that realm as well. Just like it's important in Islam, we know that there's ayat in the Quran. We know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ who said that if you don't go more than 2 nights without creating a will, or if you have any property, you should not go more than 2 nights without creating a will. So we understand the importance, Islamically speaking. And also from the legal perspective, this is a very, very important topic that other communities have taken advantage of. We always look to the Jewish community, right? And they have this foresight in terms of looking at the next generation. So they've really taken advantage of estate planning. That's how their institutions are built. That's how their hospitals are built. That's how everything you see, that's how it's built, because through estate planning, creating endowments, and those types of legal tools that our community needs to be sophisticated to. So just as a little bit of a background, 55% of American adults do not have a will. And so perhaps for a non-Muslim, this might be okay, right? Because under Illinois law, there's something called intestate succession. We'll talk about it, but basically there's a generic way that your property is distributed if you don't have a will. So there's a big myth out there that if you don't have a will, all your money's going to go to the state. That's not true. But what is going to happen is that the state is going to determine how your assets are distributed. You've lost that chance now. Okay? So us as Muslims, it's so important for us to get wills because Allah tells us how our assets should be distributed. And the only way to accomplish that is through taking an affirmative step of getting a will. So 55% of Americans do not have a will. And this issue costs $2 billion per year in revenue, let's say. And 1.5 million of that goes to the attorneys. Why? Because people fight. People fight. We fight. Our families fight. Everybody's fighting. And money is one of those things that will change you in an instant. As soon as somebody passes away, you grieve for a day, you grieve for 2 days, and then the next thing, what? You call the lawyer because you want this, you need that, my brother's doing this, my sister's doing that. And so we need to develop that foresight and create these documents so that we don't leave our family in shambles. There was a CIOGC study where they had sent a survey to their top donors, okay? And basically asked them, amongst other questions, do you have an estate plan? Or do you have a will, number one? And number two, do you have a trust? So out of the 100 top donors, we're talking people who dropped a lot of money. A handful had a will, and maybe 1 or 2 had a trust. SubhanAllah, we've become doctors, we've become entrepreneurs, we've become all these different things, but we're so short-sighted that we're building it up, and then we're letting it fall. So for the legal sense, what is estate planning? And this is really the sunnah, right? Our job is to think about death. To think about what's going to happen to us, what's going to happen to our family, what's going to happen to our deen after we pass away. And this is just a fancy term for what we're supposed to be doing anyways. Planning what happens to our property after we pass away. And planning it in such a manner that we avoid conflicts, we limit the cost of attorney's fees, of this registration, this deed, all the fees and fines and everything that comes along with this process, and to do it in a quick, efficient manner. And what I'm going to add to that is to do it according to how Allah wants it. So in estate planning, that's kind of the overall view of estate planning. Getting our assets to the next generation, planning generationally. So how do we actually accomplish that? So when you go to a lawyer or when you talk to somebody, what are you actually doing to estate plan? So there's a few documents that, inshallah, we'll go through. Again, this is not supposed to be comprehensive. I can't teach you everything. But just to introduce you to the concept, inshallah. So we'll talk about wills, trust, powers of attorney, all of these different things. And so before we proceed, I have a case since when I started practicing law, 10 years. Somebody had a bunch of land in a state, 400 acres. That 400 acres, they started fracking. And they started getting millions of dollars a year. Now they have mineral rights and fracking rights and this, right, all these different things. And now this land is generating millions of dollars a year. And this is 10 years ago. So this individual passed away 10 years ago, didn't leave a will, didn't leave a trust, nothing. And now the brothers and sisters, everybody's been fighting for the last 10 years. They've literally spent $1 million in attorney's fees. So that's the worst case scenario, right? And may Allah protect us. Okay, so, just for another reason, right? Just to pound it in, right? We've already talked about the importance, but here's just another, reason. What happens if you don't have an estate plan, right? So we talked about this a little bit. If you don't have a will, the state's going to determine how your assets are going to be distributed. There is one saving grace, right? So it's a blessing and it's a curse, depending on how you look at it. So we do have joint property, right? So when you have husband and wife owning a property together, and one of them passes away, it automatically becomes the other spouse's property, 100%, okay? In one way, from the legal perspective, you can say, okay, that's a positive, right? Because if husband passes away, wife gets the property, there's no problem. But there's an issue in Islamic law of whether there is such thing as joint property, right? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm just highlighting it, right? That there may be an issue as to joint property, because how can somebody own one piece of property, this person owns it 100%, this person owns it 100%, husband passes away, there's no distribution. The wife gets it, right? So this is an issue. The other way that property automatically passes, so we talked about joint property, if you have people on a bank account, you have people on a house, one of them passes away, as long as they're joint tenants, they will receive that property. Same thing with bank accounts. Same thing with beneficiaries. So if you have a 401k, IRA, you name a beneficiary, it's going to go to that person. Again, there's Islamic topics to discuss there as well. So now anything that you don't have a joint property name on, or is in your name, or you don't have a beneficiary, that's now what's going to be distributed according to state law. Okay, and that's where the will is going to come in place and say, this is how I want things to be distributed. So the other issue is, who's in charge? And so we want to make sure we answer that question. How will you be buried? Alhamdulillah, for us, most of us, we all live.
Yeah. Once a husband or wife dies, immediately the tarqa, immediately Quran and Sharia is there. If you are following Sharia, you don't consider, you don't give it whole thing to the wife or to the husband.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to highlight actually. So the question was,
Iman is on the Sharia.
yes. So the issue is, yes, what we want to do is we want to accomplish Islam, and the point I'm trying to make is that we cannot accomplish Islam without taking this step. right? Because the generic law, the local law of the land will override what Islamic law says. If you don't have a will, or your will says something else, no one can force them to apply Islamic law. We have to do that ourselves. So in terms of how you will be buried. And the last thing is, and this is very, very important reason to do estate planning. We talked about money, but there's another really important reason to do estate planning, and that's for your children. If you have children who are under the age of 18, who's going to take care of them if mom and dad pass away? This has to be in the will. There's a guardianship provision that will say that this is the person I want. Someone you value, somebody you trust, somebody that you want to raise your children. You pick that person rather than the court picking that person for you. So all of these things have to be considered for why we need an estate plan.
There is a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Could you let him finish? We can ask
Yes,
questions
please.
later.
I think so the question at the end. Jazakallah khair.
So in terms of accomplishing these goals, right, is the simple solution is having a will. And the other thing that we talked about the distribution of the state, which is not in line with Islam, but also the order in which debts are paid is not in line with the Sunnah either. So Islamically, we have to pay for certain things in certain orders, right? We have to pay for our last illness, we have to pay for our funeral, we have to pay for our debts, then we can do the 1/3 charity, then it goes to the inheritors. But in the state setting, the debts, there's like different classes of debts. There's 9 different classes of debts, and you're trying to push those off to the end as much as possible. So there's not a culture, there's not a law that requires you to try to pay your debts off first. So we need to make sure having a will so that we can accomplish that aspect of Islam as well. This is where we're going to assign an executor, somebody you trust, to supervise the entire process. You can dictate your burial and funeral rites, especially for those who have come from non-Muslim families or new Muslims. This is very important because your family is going to want to bury in their way. The will is going to be the only thing that tells them exactly how you want to be buried. Guardianship of minor children, we talked about that. So that's the will. Okay, that's literally level 1 estate planning. Everybody should have a will. Okay? So the next question becomes, okay, this is just a piece of paper. How does this work practically speaking? Right? And so to understand it, there's something called probate court. So just like there's traffic court, there's criminal court, there's all these different divisions of the court system. There's a particular division called probate. And the purpose of probate court is to make sure that the will is valid, to supervise and make sure that there's no problems. If there's any claims that arise, the judge would be there to make the decision. And it's just it's a process, okay? So what happens is that when you pass away and now your executor needs to get access to your accounts, they're going to go to the court, they're going to show the will to the judge is going to review it, okay, looks good, and now he gives you a certificate. This will is valid, and now you are in charge, and now you can access all of this person's property, okay? That process takes about 6 months to 1 year, okay? So what can happen is that your property is getting sold or transferred, but it all has to be frozen for a limited amount of time, this 1 year process, right? It's going to be frozen for a while until all of these issues are resolved. So for the average family, okay, let's say you have a house, you have some retirement accounts and things like that. Probate, some lawyers try to scare you and say it's the worst thing ever. It's not necessarily the worst thing ever, but depending on what property you have, sometimes it makes sense to invest up front to save the problems on the back end. And that's where you might have heard about a trust. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit as well. Oh, we talked about probate. And yeah, just one thing I missed. So probate, so what can the judge see? The judge only has control over those things that are in your name alone. So if it's joint property we talked about, it goes to the wife. If there's no beneficiary, if there is a beneficiary, it goes directly to that beneficiary. So we're really talking about those assets in your own name. And yes, it could be costly without the proper planning as well. Okay, so the primary way to avoid probate, this court process, so this is now level 2 estate planning. Level 1 we said was wills. Level 2, this is trusts, right? In our community, we're at this level, okay? Alhamdulillah, we have education, we have wealth, we have businesses, we have we have everything, right? This is the level we need to at least be at as a community, is taking advantage of trust. And so there's two primary reasons that people use a trust. Is to avoid probate, this entire process, and to protect money for your children. Okay, so the way I like to think about a trust, okay, so in US law, there's something called the bundle of rights, okay? So when you own property, you own so many different little rights that all come together to give you that ownership of that property. So for example, you have you own that property, you can possess that property, you can lease that property, you can sell that property, right of alienation, right of occupation, all these different rights that you have as it relates to this property. And so what we're doing with a trust is we're playing a trick, right? It's just like when you create an LLC, it's a legal fiction. You're registering a corporation with the state, and now that's giving you some type of corporate protection. So in that same way with the trust, we're playing a trick. What we're doing is we are taking things out of your name, and we're having it owned by a trust. Okay, so think about it this way. You have a box. So we want to put, a phone in there, we want to put a mouse in there, we want to put this in there. And basically what we're doing with the trust is we're removing it from you, we're putting it in a box, we're putting a shipping label on it that says that once I pass away, give it to this person, this person, this person. And because it's in that box, the judge is not involved because it's not in your name. It's in the name of this box, okay? And because it's a name of a box, it doesn't go through this state process, okay? And now we have a private way to distribute our property overnight. So the day you pass away, the next day, according to this, the shipping label, this person's the owner. You don't have to go through court. So this is, the benefits of the trust, like I said, are to avoid probate. If you have out-of-state property, this is a must. If you have property in different states, imagine having to go through probate in each one of those states to get the title changed on your property. Instead, what you do is you create a trust and now have all these properties under that trust, so the minute you pass away, boom, the owners are established. You don't have to go to court in all these different places, get court orders, get access to these accounts and things like that. The other benefit of trust is protecting money for children. Okay. So what do I mean by that? So Islamically speaking, there's an issue here where as soon as you pass away, your inheritors have a right to that money. It's their money, okay? And so when it comes to trust, you have the ability to delay that distribution. The thing is that Islamically speaking, if you passed away and now, let's say the child is baligh, okay? They should get that money. But it's, under US law, once they're 18, then they get access to that money. So, if Mufti Hisham, or you can ask a scholar in terms of, is it okay to, if the law says 18, can we have the trust distribute at 18, right? So that's a question for a scholar. But basically what we can do is we can create circumstances. For example, if you have a disabled child or a special needs child or a child who's going to be spendthrift. There's an Islamic definition of who is so they're not good at protecting their money at all that you can actually withhold that money from them, right? So we can use a trust to have somebody else manage that money on behalf of the child until they reach certain quota or age or intellect, or I don't know, whatever you would need in compliance with Islam. There's also different types of trusts, right? So far what I've been talking about is a very generic revocable trust, meaning it's a trust that is really just there for probate reasons, and it's not a very sophisticated trust necessarily, but there's other types of trusts like irrevocable trusts, where once you put money in here, you can't really access it in your own name ever again, right? And so the benefit of some of these types of trusts is that it can save in taxes. If you need to avoid estate taxes or other different types of taxes, we can create trusts to help with that as well. So, we talked about wills, we talked about trusts. Like I said, I do think that trust is where our community should be at. There's other issues that we face as well. So far what we've talked about is what happens after you pass away. But a lot of money, time, and conflict is involved, unfortunately, before the person passes away. Right? This is where you see the issues of, khuda na khasta, there's dementia or incapacity of some sort, and now you have to pay the mortgage, but only so-and-so's name was on the mortgage, or the business, or whatever else is going on, right? Or there might be a situation where, khuda na khasta, there's life support, or something like that. So if we don't have a plan in place, a lot of problems arise in this short amount of time. And to address that issue, we usually use things like healthcare power of attorneys or financial powers of attorney. So, for example, you're naming somebody to make those decisions for you. You're naming somebody to access your accounts. And these things don't come alive unless you have two doctors saying that you're incapacitated. So it's not like starting tomorrow they can make these decisions for you. Okay, so online wills. So obviously there's some bias here, right? Alhamdulillah in one sense, but may Allah protect us in another sense, most of my practice is divorce, okay? So I would say, the minority is estate planning, just because our community for some reason doesn't get wills and trusts, they get more divorces. So there's a little bias here, but what I would say is try to avoid online wills, okay? And the reason I say that is that they're usually very generic. They're not in accordance state by state law. Each state has a different requirement for what's a valid will. And they're not going to be the ones to give you the legal advice to make it valid in your particular state, because they can't. Also, if they mess up, there's no one to sue. There's no one to be held responsible for these types of wills. The other problem is that a lot of these wills have a lot of Islamic language, okay? In the sense that, there's a preamble that, I testify, of course, we all testify to the oneness of Allah, but the problem that we face, we've seen in Tennessee, we've seen it in Kentucky, is that when you have this type of language, the judge looks at it and says, oh, this is Sharia law, and they'll throw it away. So what you want to make sure is that you're accomplishing the ends of Islam, but you don't have to use those terms, right? You don't have to say, whatever, madhab or whatever it is. You pick the madhab, you pick whatever the style is, and let the lawyer actually write it out. So, kind of to go full circle, right? The purpose of this short presentation is to give us some knowledge, some talking points, some language, some vocabulary about estate planning, so we can think about our own situation, and when we do talk to somebody, we know where to start. We know the issues, right? But as I was kind of highlighting, is Islam has a very long-term vision, right? It's just not our life. It's till the end of time, right? And the systems that Allah has put in place is to get us there, And so we have to have that vision. And I would advise this community, MSI, any masjid that I go to, is to think about an endowment. Right? So basically the way that endowment works is when people pass away, in their will, they can say that I want a certain percentage of my estate to go to MSI. And now MSI takes that money and they invest it. And that money grows. And you don't touch that money that comes in there. The goal, inshallah, is to have the whole community keep MSI in their mind, donate to this endowment, and now have the endowment run the institution. Look at Harvard. Look at any big institution. This is how they survive, right? And of course, we've only been in this country for 100 years. I get it, right? But at the same time, I think now is that time to become 2.0. Also, as individuals, alhamdulillah, many of you donate a lot of money, okay? And of course, we do it for the pleasure of Allah, inshallah. And it's hard to make this transition, but there's also thinking of taxes, okay? in the sense that we can use our donations for tax purposes to save on taxes by creating charitable foundations, by creating certain types of trust. And that might be actually a minor reason. The bigger reason is to establish a legacy, right? A lot of times we complain, we give this person this much money and we don't know what they do with it. Okay, create a charitable trust of your passion. You want to feed kids? Okay, your charitable foundation is to feed kids. You want to teach hifz? Okay, make that charitable trust. Have long-term future. Our hospitals, our clinics, our law firm, everything that we want in our society is done through estate planning in terms of building hospitals and clinics and our own court systems. Like family law, this is a little rant, but subhanAllah, when it comes to family law as well, people put Islam on the side, just like in this area as well. We have a whole way of doing estate planning and we put it on the side thinking we're smarter. Same thing in family law, right? In family law, we have a whole process of marriage and divorce, but we put it to the side thinking that we know better, right? So, inshallah, that's just a rant of mine, but I hope that we can really understand our deen and see how it can benefit us in this life and the next life. So, with that, I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts that I made the point clear. And so I don't have much else to say, inshallah. I wanted to keep it short and keep it more for Q&As. I don't know if you guys consider that short. So inshallah, I'm not sure how you want to do the question and answers.
Assalamu alaikum. I have the microphone. Just raise your hand and inshallah I will bring the microphone to you. So you have any questions, just keep it limited, 1 or 2, so that we can give the opportunity to everyone to answer the questions. Jazakallah khair.
Attorney Saab, can you show an example, some kind of standard will on the board so we can understand what is the practical way?
So,
or you have a sample to show on the board here so a common sense can understand.
Yeah, I can Google one really quickly, but again, like I said, we don't want to use online wills. I don't know.
Can I share something?
I don't know if you can see this. Hold on. Yeah. So look, it's just going to be a document, right? And it's going to say last will of so-and-so. It's going to name yourself. It's going to name your family. It's going to name who your executor is, who you want to be in charge. It's going to give your distribution, how you want your assets to be distributed. There's going to be a section on guardianship. There's going to be a section on the powers of the executor. There's going to be a section on funeral and burial rights. So basically, it's just going to be written like a document. Usually it's like 7 to 10 pages long, just outlining the different aspects of a will. So I don't know if this answers your question.
Assalamu alaikum. What's the difference between will and a living will?
That's a good question. So we want to differentiate between a last will and testament and a living will. Okay? So a last will and testament deals with property. What happens to your property after you pass away? A living will is kind of like a healthcare power of attorney. It's basically telling your doctors what you want to happen in terms of life support or not life support, DNRs, those type of things. So that's a living will. That's different than a last will and testament.
So requested if you can to answer back, if you can tell your name so that the attorney can address you directly. Jazakallah khair.
No, I don't have any questions. You have done a wonderful explanation. And I just want to know, can we get a video of what you have spoken today so that we can go through as again in our, in our time, what you have.
Sure. I mean, I'm not sure if. Yeah.
We have it on our YouTube channel. If you go today's YouTube channel, it's already there. Yeah, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair, Brother Naveed. You have done a great job, mashallah. May Allah bless you. May Allah put barakah khair afia. First question, can we get this presentation?
Yeah, I did send it to you.
Okay, great. Jazakallah khair. I have some will already. So I've worked a little bit on this last will thing. We have got it approved from New Jersey and Illinois also. So how we can do it that with you, that can we share it with you and then you can validate it?
Yes.
That it's not an online will. So we have created it on the basis of Sharia.
Yeah, sure. So you can email me.
I can email.
Yeah, you can email me a copy of the will. Is the
Naveed
email address.
Farouk. Jazakallah khair.
Yeah. Yeah, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
My name is Hussain.
That's fine.
Question is that if we make an LLC and involve all the family members in that LLC and just write down a will so that there will be no conflict among the members of the LLC, would that work?
Yeah, so that's usually a solution we do use. We usually call it a family LLC, right? So basically what we do is we create the LLC, and instead of having the will operate the LLC, we use an operating agreement. So it's called an operating agreement. The operating agreement is the technical term of like the constitution or the bylaws of the company, okay? And so in those documents is where we put this person owns this percentage. If they pass away, then this is how the shares will be distributed. So yeah, that's actually an easy way for us to accomplish the Islamic fractions or the Islamic distribution, is to use an LLC because we can use shares as representation. And again, there is, talk to a scholar in terms of the representation of shares and property, but yes, we can use an LLC for our estate planning purposes.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a question also. Once you are done with these wills and you prepared it, let's say you reviewed it, everything is done, where do you save it? What do you do to make it official? I mean, you can give it to your families and all that, but how do you make it official?
That's a very good question. So the thing about a will is that it doesn't actually come into effect until after you pass away, okay? So certain counties have a registration that you can do with the county of your will. I actually don't advise that usually, right? What I usually advise is that you keep the original at your house or in a safe place and let your executors know where it is, okay? You don't even have to give them a copy. I don't recommend giving them a copy. I simply say that if something happens to me, this is where you can find it in my house or here, whatever it is, okay? Then they access the will, and that's the will they take in. The reason I say that is if you register a will and you forget to update the registration, they're only going to look to that registered one. They don't care if there's another will that's even future dated, right? So that's why I recommend keeping it in that manner. Also, don't keep it in a security deposit box either, right? Because the people you're assigning to access it, they need that will to get the access, right? So I would say keep it somewhere at home. Let your executors know where in your house you keep your will.
Yeah, one more quick question. As you know, most of the situation in this country is in a joint ownership.
Yes.
You buy a home, your spouse is already partner, half and half partner. So everything else you look at it, even if they're alive, they're partners. So when you're writing your will and your wife owns half of it, how do you deal with that?
That's subhanAllah. I mean, that's a great question. There's the Islamic aspect of it, which maybe Sheikh Saab can talk about. But from the practical perspective, okay. So yes, it's actually not a 50-50 interest. It's actually a 100-100 interest. And that's where the problem lies, right? It wouldn't actually be that big of a problem if you bought a house together, you two had the understanding that this is a 50-50 ownership of this house, and some father passes away, his 50% portion gets split. That's not really a problem. The problem is because joint ownership says 100-100. Okay, so how do we deal with that? Okay, so that's where I don't have a clear answer yet. I don't have a clear answer. And I'm working with scholars to figure this out, but I don't know how. I take the position that joint property is not Islamic. That's my position. because I don't think there could be 100% ownership. So usually what you have to do is you have to break joint ownership, or you place it in a trust. The trust is the simplest solution if you want to be very precise, very clean, and dictate exactly what each person holds. There are some drawbacks. There's liability drawbacks, because now you don't own it as husband and wife. There's other small drawbacks, but if you want to be very technical, the best way to do it, in my opinion, is break joint ownership and have it held by a trust.
You know, one of the attorneys, this follow-up question, I'm going to leave this question after this because other people may have other questions. So one of the attorneys suggested that you have your wife or spouse sign a piece of paper that she's giving up all the rights to you for that property. Let's say it's a home, which is usually that's the biggest property people own. And that will be good enough. Is that true?
Okay, so this is an issue of disclaimer. So the issue, it depends on what you're talking about, right? Are you gifting that property during your lifetime? Okay, if she's gifting it during her lifetime to you and she had an ownership of it and she's conveying it to you, that's one issue. But again, there's a difference here, but can somebody disclaim property without knowing what the value is? That's the question. Okay, can someone right now write something saying that I disclaim, I don't want any inheritance from you if you pass away? I don't know if it's Islamic to write that, and maybe Sheikh can. Okay.
So this is a question that comes up. So first thing, when it comes to a lot of these matters, when it comes to finances and inheritance, it's best to sit down with a mufti and have your own personal situation analyzed. Because your situation, my situation might be 98% the same. That 2% difference will cause will change the outcome significantly. So let's take a few steps back. When it comes to joint ownership, yes, there is a lot of discussion taking place about joint ownership. Some of the scholars will make us go back to see what was the intention upon purchase. And so, for example, when we purchased our home, the intention was clear with my wife that this is your home. Even though I am paying monthly, this is your home. So I have very clear at the outset have said that if you pass away first, it has to be distributed. If I pass away first, there's nothing that's going to come from the inheritance because this is not my home. So some couples may have done that with their automobiles, with their homes, etc. So it is important at the very outset when you're sitting down with a lawyer to make that will, to make the intention known. If individuals have not made that intention, but they may have sort of indirectly made the intention, to backtrack and identify that. Let's say that's never happened. Now, for an individual then to say that, okay, whoever passes away first, my wife, if you pass away first, or if I pass away first, then I will have a signed agreement that says that it will just come completely to you. The ability to transfer a property to a person upon death outside of the constraints of Sharia does not exist. She can gift it to me while alive, but then now I've taken control of it completely. But it cannot become active at the point of death or maradul maut, when she's about to pass away, or if I'm about to pass away. So that can't take place. And so if that's what the circumstance you're mentioning, then it would, in most cases, not be able to take place. Now, these are generalities I've given. The specificities are with every individual, and I would recommend to go to Mufti Hisham if he was here, etc. They would be able to help put that together.
Yeah, next question.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Khalid Latifi. My question, I think Brother Sheikh Saad just explained the situation. My question is, how does the trust comes into the picture? Because what you said is will is personal. Then in the trust, you are delegating your powers to a third party. It's not you. So a little bit what explanation is trust is really acceptable in Sharia to make a trust.
So Sheikh, so I would just say that trustee isn't, during your life is not a third party, it's actually you. So that can help inshallah. Yeah.
That was pretty much it. That while you are alive, that trust, once a person passes away, is it called power of attorney? Like the person's representing, your executor.
Trustee.
Yeah, your trustee. Yeah. That is almost taking the same role as an executor. While when you're alive, it's you anyway. So it carries, without focusing too much on the terminology, the concepts are very much aligned to Sharia anyway.
My name is Khalid Abdus-Sami, Dr. Khalid Abdus-Sami. I have two questions. Could you define the online will first?
Sure. Online will is where you go online, you Google, Islamic will, you print it out and you sign it. That's what I mean by online will.
Okay. Second question I have, I made a living will and a trust 20 years ago. I have a revocable trust and irrevocable trust. I have both trust. It was 20 years ago. You are an attorney. You don't do it for a charity work. How much would you charge if I want you to look over my trust, my living will, my revocable trust? How much would you charge to revise it?
So review is free. I mean, if you email it to me, I'll review anybody's will, inshallah. In terms of the actual service, so it would depend on if we're just doing amendments to the trust. I don't like to restart the whole thing. If I can use the trust that you paid somebody else to do, I'll try to be surgical and try to update those particular provisions to try to save you as much money as possible. But for the sake of just saying it, right? Like a regular revocable trust, we charge $2,000 for. $2,000. To make the trust, to give you an idea of revision or whatever else smaller than that would cost.
So we'll take one question from sister's side. This is the question, Maisab.
Will or trust, which out of the two is beneficial in terms of taxes? So the will is tax neutral. It doesn't have any impact on your taxes. Trust, there's different types of trust. The revocable trust is tax neutral, meaning it doesn't have any impact on your taxes. Only irrevocable trusts, charitable trusts, those have impact on taxes. So basically anything that you have to kind of create a new EIN number, so like when you create a company, okay, so you have a social security number. When you create a company, you have to create something called the EIN number that acts as the social security number for that company, okay? So only if I create a trust that I have to now register with the IRS and get an EIN number, like its own social security number, for like an irrevocable trust, a charitable trust, a Medicaid trust, special needs trust, those are going to be the ones that impact taxes. The one that I talked about, the $2,000 trust, that has no impact on taxes, doesn't save you taxes. I hope that answers the question.
Next question.
Assalamu alaikum. So if we create a will, does the will have to be super generic, or can we, contact scholars and, actually specify distribution according to, let's say, if I pass away, my spouse will get this percentage, my child 1 will get this percentage, child 2 will get this percentage. Can we specify those details also in the will?
Yes, 100%, and that's what I advise. I don't like when people say, distribute my assets according to Islam, right? It's better to put the percentages there, 1/8 to my wife, 1/6 to my mom, 1/6 to my dad, whatever is left to, you want to outline it. You want to be as specific as possible.
Sure. And one other question related to this, let's say we create a will with all the details specified, and then after some time, 6 months, 6 years, 5 years, the situation changes. Some family members who have been specified in the will, they pass away or something else changes. How would that work? Would we have to update the will, or how would that work?
This is actually pretty beautiful in and of itself. There's actually 2 levels of inheritance. Okay, so you have like the first right, second right. So the first right is people your age usually, and the people older than you, right? Your parents, your wife. Okay, that's going to be like the first class of distribution, and the second class of distribution is going to be whatever remains goes to your kids. So it's very easy for us to create a will that says 1/8 wife, 1/6 mom, 1/6 dad, okay? And because we have a remainder clause, if any of these 3 people pass away, it's automatically going to fall to be distributed amongst the children, okay? So for people your age or older, and if people start passing away, you don't necessarily have to update it. And then the other thing we usually put is that if we have any additional children, then we put in the language for the kids. So usually for the standard case, you may be able to get away with it, right? But I do advise that every few years you should, just email me. Like I said, I review wills for free, so just email it to me, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, Abdul Mateen here. Do you have any recommendations? Like in my case, I'm the only child, and my father and I share bank accounts do everything together. Is it possible to do one trust between us, or does he have to create his own trust? I have to create my own trust. Considering the fact that I would be his execution, the person that would kind of do all the stuff after, or in the event of my death, I would hand him over all the custody.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a very specific question, and I don't want to like give you legal advice here, right? But I mean, usually you want different trusts for different people. That's the generic rule. But again, your situation might differ, and if maybe we can talk, inshallah, and we can come up with the best strategy, inshallah.
I just want to add to that, different trusts and different accounts for different people as well. I've noticed bank accounts, a bank account has all this money coming in. And when all this money comes in, what subsequently happens is that when someone passes away, it's so muddled together, it's so difficult to tell. I mean, your situation might be a little different, but it's so difficult to tell, well, this spouse made this much and this spouse made this much, and it all muddles together. And at the end, we're sitting there thinking, how are we going to figure this all out? It's not simple. I actually need to excuse myself because I have class at 3, and I need to go and prepare for class. So, jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Saad Qadri. We appreciate your time and effort. Jazakallah khair. Next question, please.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Imtiaz. I might have not catch your first part of the speech. Suppose somebody didn't sign the will or trust, so if goes to probate, so is there any lot of difficulties as go to probate?
No, it's not necessarily difficult, right? So if an attorney has the experience in probate, it's just like any other case for them, right? So I mean, alhamdulillah, like in our firm, for example, we've done so many people's passed away. Probate to us is just second nature, right? So if you find the right lawyer, yeah, you're gonna have to spend money, that's the problem. But in terms of complexity, it's not complex, it just takes time and money. And the other problem with probate is that if the siblings don't agree on the distribution, the state generic law is going to apply. So if one kid says, I don't want it Islamically, then the probate court has to apply the law of the land. So that's the problem with probate.
Yeah, next question.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. My name is Ajmal Sharif. I have 2 questions. One is that we've been learning throughout our life that whatever wealth you have in your lifetime, you can assign to anyone. So all this comes after your death, right? Inheritance and everything. So, for example, my wife and I own the house. I am signing the closing agreement with full hoshawaz, saying that if I die, everything will be her. So I'm agreeing it and signing it. So then, when will the question come that will not be a valid?
No, so I think that's what Sheikh Saad was saying, right? Is that if you've made the intention right when you bought the house that this is not your house, this is your wife's house, then listen to what he said, right? I don't want to repeat because I don't want to misquote him, but that was, I think, the situation that Sheikh Saad was talking about, that if you make the intention up front and that's their property, then that's their property.
No, either one of will die, right? So my concern is that bank accounts are there.
So, okay, that's the problem, is that you're making the term contingent on death. You're making the ownership of that property contingent on death, and that's the problem. You're saying that the trigger of who owns this property is going to be determined at death. That's what makes it un-Islamic.
Okay. So what will happen if we have property in India, or we're going to inherit property in India?
Yeah, so India, it has its own laws, right? So that's the problem, is that when I create a will, I'm creating it for Illinois and the US, right? I can't guarantee that it works in India, but India or Pakistan, they have their own inheritance laws and their own rules. If you have property in those countries, you should talk to a lawyer in that country.
Okay. Okay. One last, the will and trust are mutually exclusive, or we need to have both?
So that's a good question. So you can have a will without a trust, but I do not recommend having a trust without a will. The will is level 1, you want to put the trust on top of it.
Anybody else have any questions? Just raise your hand, please. I'm coming there.
One more question. Does the will and or a trust apply only to tangible property, or is it also for intangible property, let's say like stocks or software or things like that?
No, absolutely. It's all of those things. So it's going to be your brokerage accounts, your stocks accounts, your IP, your intellectual property that you own. Whatever has value, you can use that will. Anything that has a title, we can deal with in the will. Even your clothes and your things like that, we can deal with in the will. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ibrahim. Are you able to help with out-of-state wills, Wisconsin?
Wisconsin, I can. I'm licensed in Illinois and Wisconsin.
Okay.
Yeah.
The last 2 or 3 questions, please. Just keep it limited because our attorney Naveed Hussain has to go also.
Well, now, Usman again. I don't have a question, but I have a recommendation for all the brothers that if Allah has given, mashallah, a lot of wealth in US and also overseas, it will be good if, and our children, they can have a lot over here. So whatever is left over in overseas, if we write a will for organization, a welfare organization that do the best job in that area, if we will make a will for them to own that, to use in such a way that they will get the benefit of it on monthly basis and use it for charity purpose, inshallah, it will be good for our own akhirah too.
And just a point on that note, right? So we actually have a limit as to how much we can give in charity, right? So Allah tells us exactly how much each person receives, and we also have a limitation as to how much we can give away. We can't put in our will, everything goes to charity. We can only give up to 1/3, right? So I just wanted to put that out there.
The last question, Jazakallah khair. Last 2, yeah.
No, my name is Munawar Khan. Can we define the will according to the Sharia as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defined in the Quran?
Yes.
And what you are telling, you can give the amount more than Allah has prescribed to a son or to a daughter, to wife. Allah has given the percentage, how much wife can get, how much a son can get. We can't go over than that. Otherwise, the iman is gone. Sharia, the iman gone. Whatever your namaz and your roza, your umrah, hajj, gone. The moment you modify Allah's ayat, you are gone. Because you cannot change a dot in the Quran. The other thing is, there is a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. La wasiya fil warsa. La wasiya fil warsa. I did it myself to my distribution. The moment I read it over here, it was a big list of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I read it, La wasiya fil warsa, because my father wrote me a letter while he was going to Hajj. The property you have, it is yours. I said, no. La wasiya fil warsa will put my father into big problem. He will lose he will go to Nazibillah. So I changed it. I nullified all things. I distributed according to Sharia that Allah has provided.
Thank you.
So don't add plus or minus what Allah has distributed.
The last question, inshallah.
Sorry, one more question. Brother, there is a use case. The brother died on the street. He is heading to the office and he is a young man. And when the hospital 911 called, obviously blah, blah, blah happened. So what exactly we can do in that particular situation? We got the news in the evening because his wife was also working and hospital took care of everything. And when we got the body, so that was so that some of his parts was taken away, taken out from the body. Because I think so whatever I've been doing, I have come to know that hospital will inform these people first, the donations, that for the taking out the body, they will inform us later on. So is there any way that we can do these hospitals that please inform my masjid or please inform this thing if something happened to any of the Muslim community, anyone? And this has been happening a lot. Because I spoke with the pastor in this Glen Oaks and he said that nobody's doing anything. You guys don't have anything. If someone dies, we come to know, is he a Muslim or what exactly is there? We don't have anything in our pocket. So is there any way, we did something in New Jersey, that we have created a card, small card, that will be in my pocket. If I dies, so that card is telling me that thing, that okay, this guy so-and-so, please contact this person.
Yeah.
Can we do these things?
I mean, that's really, I think the only solution is to have people carry cards. The other thing would be some type of legislation for notification requirements, but I think it would get sticky. I don't think it's practical to have notification requirements based off of what that person's religion may or may not be. So I think the practical application is like what you said, maybe a card or something like that.
So the last and final question, inshallah, and after that we have snacks and chai outside. So just wait for the last question and the concluding dua, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Muhammad Dawood. Say I have a property and everything in my and my wife's name. Khuda na khasta, if accident happen and we both gone, then what will happen?
Yes, that's okay. So, yeah, that's Jazakallah khair. So that's what we've been talking about. Is basically what would happen is we would first, your children would have to get that property in their name, okay? And they wouldn't be able to because they can't go to the county and say, I own this property. They're going to say, who are you? Okay? So then they have to go to probate court. They have to tell the judge that you passed away, death certificate, okay? But you don't have a will. I mean, inshallah you do. But let's say you don't have a will. Now what's going to happen is the judge says, okay, fine, son, you are the executor, but it might take a lot of paperwork because you didn't appoint one. So now the 4 brothers or however many siblings there are. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Exactly. So if you both pass away, now your children have to decide amongst themselves which one are going to be executor. They submit the petition to the court. They get the paper from the court. Now they decide, do we sell the property or rent it out or what do we do? So they have to go through that process to get the paper. Now, if they sell the property, they can't touch the money for at least 6 months to 1 year until the claim period has, credit card bills, hospital bills, all those things have to roll in. Once all of that is decided, then your children would get access to the property. That's why it's so important, especially when you have a house, and most of us have put our life savings, to at least make a will or a trust, or there's even something called a transfer on death instrument. It's very cheap. You just record something with the county that says, if I pass away, this house goes to this person. So that's the exact situation that I'm trying to caution everybody from, is your kids will have problems getting the money from the house if you don't do anything about it.
Jazakallah khair.
Yeah, go ahead.
So thank you for coming. Attorney, he came to us not because of his business. We asked him to come here, and he was here with no self-interest. Of course, he can help you. You can seek out. You can even hire him for your work. That's up to you. But that's not why he's here for. Alhamdulillah, he's a very down-to-earth gentleman of our community, and he's also Hafiz, as you have heard from him. So I also want to thank you, all of you, for coming. And also keep in mind, though, when you do your will, again, this was not the intention, so don't take me wrong. When you do your will, always remember MSI or any masjid you go to, okay? Because the jaza will be with you. If you want to give it to another masjid, doesn't matter which masjid. But always keep in mind that the Islamic institution should be also part of your will. So with that, we end our program. We will have Hafiz Sahab. Okay, so you see on the screen here, in case if you have more specific question that you want to be answered from a mufti, darulifta.darulqasim.org. You can write it down in your phone or take a picture from where you're sitting of this screenshot.
Please be seated, we'll make a dua, inshallah, short
And also remember that the full presentation is on YouTube. So when you go to MSI link and you click on it, you will see this full presentation again if you want to see it. Okay? Please be seated. There will be a dua, and then you can go outside and have some tea and a snack.
If you have 2 disinterested witnesses, it should be fine. Notary makes it stronger.
Please be seated. We'll make a short dua, inshallah, and then we'll proceed to the snacks table, inshallah, out in the lobby.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار رب اجعلني مقيم الصلاة ومن ذريتي ربنا وتقبل دعاء ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين وجعلنا للمتقين إماما. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, accept this gathering, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, give us the foresight to think about our future generations, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, allow us all to preserve our iman, our wealth, our life, our intellect, our lineage, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, allow us to take advantage of the blessings that you have given us, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, allow us to become educated in a powerful community, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, give success to the Muslims, Ya Allah. Give success to the Muslims in this country and every country in the world, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, please write our names as those who have remembered you today, Ya Allah. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
We have some business cards for attorney, inshallah, on the tea table outside. Yeah, outside in the lobby. So while taking the tea and the snacks, please pick one from there. Jazakallah khair.
Naveed, can I have your cell phone?
It's on the card.
This is the one?
No, that's office.
Okay.
Yeah, cell phone.
This is cell phone?
Yes.
Jazakallah.